Welcome to the Endurant Show, brought to you by the Endurant Movement, dedicated to fostering resilience, post-traumatic growth, and healing through connection, awareness, and embodied practices. Please note, this episode includes discussions of grief, trauma, mental health, and neurodivergent experiences, including topics related to suicide. Some stories may be emotionally intense or triggering. Please listen in a way that feels safe for you. Take breaks, pause if needed, or engage with support from friends, family, or professionals. If you or someone you know is in crisis, you can reach the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing or texting 988 in the US, or use the chat via 988lifeline.org.
Yes, my husband of 30 years died by suicide. The night that we found him, there were a lot of people there, and they were helpers, and they were kind and trying to support me. But when everyone left and I got the keys to my house back, I felt completely traumatized and alone and unsupported. People just don't understand what it's like to live with autism. The suicide rate is 7 times higher than the general population for autistic people across the lifespan. Moving on to a new normal, that those things kept happening and there was nobody who understood me and no supports that were for autistic people. So I reached out to whoever would talk with me, and it was the American Association of Suicidology, and so we started the Autism and Suicide Prevention Work Group.
Some struggles go unseen, some grief goes unspoken, and some voices are too often overlooked. Today, we explore those hidden truths with Lisa Morgan. Lisa Morgan is a certified autism specialist, grief educator, and advocate for neurodivergent individuals. Drawing from her lived experience as an autistic adult, she provides unique insights into navigating grief, recognizing subtle emotional cues, and fostering resilience for both neurodivergent individuals and anyone navigating life's challenges. She is the founder of Lisa Morgan Consulting, co-chair of the Autism and Suicide Prevention Work Group at the American Association of Suicidology, and the author of Crisis Supports for the Autism Community. Lisa has shared her experience on TEDx Emory, inspiring professionals and families to approach grief and mental health with empathy, awareness, and practical strategies. In this episode, we explore how to address suicidal ideation with neurodivergent individuals and how to exude empathy and offer connection in crisis. Lisa shows us how to respond to these moments with compassion, connection, and hope. We'll speak with Lisa about her journey, uncover both specialized and universal lessons in addressing autistic people. Thank you so much for being here today with us, Lisa. I wanted to start our conversation by welcoming you as a member of the autistic community, someone who identifies as autistic. And I would like to just begin by having you share with us what that means to you.
Well, thanks for having me here on your show. It is good to be here. What does being autistic mean to me? It means I think differently than most of the rest of the people that I come in contact with day to day. I communicate differently. I show emotions differently. I'm just really a different thinker is mostly where it comes down to, because that involves communication and so I just basically think differently. I have some sensory issues that I do deal with on a day-to-day basis, and that can make difficult to be out in the environment, whether it's work or school or a social event. And I mean, I could go on, but those are the basic big things, I think, for me.
And thank you for sharing that. And I just wanted to start with that because As you know, our son Anthony also identified as autistic, and it can mean a lot of different things to different people. And so
Mhm.
I just wanted to kind of set the stage for what that means for you. I know autism and suicide has a personal connection for you, that there's a personal story. And I would just like to have you start by sharing with us and our community about how your personal story has inspired you to found the Autism and Suicide Prevention Work Group.
Sure. Yes, my husband of 30 years died by suicide in 2015.
I'm so sorry.
And um, there were really no supports. So the night that we found him, there were a lot of people there, and they were helpers, and they were kind and trying to support me, but there were many things that happened where it was traumatic. Um, so different things that, they wanted me to, well, they told me where to stand so I would be
Mm,
safe.
okay.
So, but where they told me to stand with my sensory sensitivities that I just talked about, I found out by myself that my husband was dead and was just a few feet away from me, beyond the garage doors. And then they surrounded me very quickly, again, to keep me safe. But that was so abrupt, and I couldn't catch up with it. That it was more fearful and traumatic than it was comforting. And then someone put their hand on my shoulder, which came out of nowhere. It was a heavy hand, and it was supposed to
Mm,
be encouraging. It took me months to realize that that was actually an encouraging
mm,
gesture, because to
yeah.
me it was, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I did something wrong. I don't know anything about this hand on my shoulder that suddenly appeared.
Mm,
Um, and then answering questions from the police sergeant, I couldn't keep up with him. I couldn't make eye contact. And I know sometimes that can mean you're lying. Um,
mm,
and I couldn't keep up with my processing speed, couldn't keep up with his questions. And then the victim's advocate came, and she wanted me to interact with her therapy dog, which was, again, a
mm,
kind gesture. But I'm a cat person. Dogs are sensory unfriendly to me.
mm,
And I kept telling her I needed to pace, and she kept asking me to sit in her car because of the heat and humidity and mosquitoes at night in Florida. And so there kept being mismatches. And
mm,
my wonderful neighbors who were keeping my son's happy and busy for me at that time asked me to sit down to a dinner, which, a family dinner, which I absolutely could not do or make small talk.
yeah.
Um, so everybody was being kind and friendly and supportive. But when everyone left and I got the keys to my house back, I felt completely traumatized and
Mm,
alone and
mhm,
unsupported. And so because that happened, and along, many, many, many instances in that first year on closing my husband's estate, and moving on to a new normal, that those things kept happening, and there was nobody
mm,
who understood me, and no supports that under were for autistic people.
mhm,
So I reached out to whoever would talk with me, and it
yeah.
was the American Association of Suicidology at the time. Colleen Crichton was executive director there, and yeah, so we started the Autism and Suicide Prevention Work Group.
Thank you for sharing that. The sounds like a very difficult and traumatic experience on many levels. And I applaud you for having the courage to speak up, and also the courage to share with us. I understand how alone you must have felt, and to take that experience and then to turn it around into something where you can help other people that may face a similar challenge. It's really beautiful, and it's really what the Endurant movement is all about, is helping one another in community, through shared experiences, through recognizing your pain in someone else and offering hope. So thank you for sharing that. Um,
Sure. And yeah, and that's why I wrote my first book. I really wanted to, um, not have what happened to me happen to another autistic person, and I wanted to bring them hope. So it is really aligned with what you're doing.
And I just want to honor you for your share as well, because I can't imagine just how frightened and scared and um, alone you must have felt. I don't want to pick words for you, but it's even having highly functioning autistic kid and being with him for 16 and a half years, like, I thought we knew, or let me speak for myself. I thought I knew and that I really understood. And hearing what you share, and it also brings me back to what he must have been going through as he was seeking help for his suicidal ideation, and that sense of loneliness, and other human beings behaving in a way that they think they are meant to from their heart and their soul, and it not having that connective outcome that they had hoped for. It it hurts my heart so much, and it brings even more hope about what we're doing together, and that this awareness is really the cure for helping the rest of the world, who by and large genuinely care, but without voices like your own, we won't really understand. So thank you for that. I'm deeply touched, and sorry for your experience as well, not only the loss of your husband, but to have to experience it in that way.
Yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, I mean, I just started working with another autistic adult, which I do that as well. But the thing that she said, which just resonates so much with me as well, and what I hear from other autistic people is that, the people that she sought out for help were kind and they were knowledgeable and they helped her a bit. She said, but after talking to me, she said, but you get it. Like, you know what it's like to live it.
mhm,
And that does make a big difference because,
mhm,
I will never know what it's like to be a man. And I could never say that I could even, entertain the thought of, being something that I'm not. And that's where, it comes into play is that people just don't understand what it's like to live with autism.
Oftentimes, I understand the social skills are a particularly challenging aspect of someone who is autistic. So what kind of misunderstandings do you think that contributes, or how does that contribute to the barriers of communication?
Well, it's really, I mean, it is social skills, but it's also the way we think about words.
Mm,
So I use the dictionary meaning of words. A lot
mhm,
of people don't. So, if somebody says, I haven't seen him in a while, and hi Lisa, how you doing? And all the surface talk.
mhm,
And then they say, let's get a cup of coffee. I've learned that that does not mean I'm going to be sitting somewhere with them with a warm cup of coffee in my hands.
mm,
I've learned that what it means is something like, I'd like to get a cup of coffee with you, but I'm really busy. And so we're probably never going to do that. So I don't understand. See, to me, I don't understand. I'd love to talk with you, but I'm really busy these days. That
right.
makes more sense to me
Mhm,
than the other one where I have to process, okay, am I getting a cup of coffee? Or does this person just really want to see me but is too busy? And in crisis support, it's
yeah.
even, more dangerous because people may ask, a suicidal autistic person, do you have a plan to die by suicide? And they say no. And then they go on and they don't support them anymore because the person said no. And that's just
Mhm,
because they've researched it and they have like three plans. And they're not going to elaborate on that because autistic people typically answer the question that was asked of them and don't kind of feel the need to talk anymore about it. So, it can get tricky when supporting. You have to ask exactly the question that you want the answer to,
Hmm.
when supporting autistic people in crisis.
Yeah, and I mean that's a huge part of our story too is sort of literal understanding. I think that our son Anthony was receiving. I mean, he in crisis learned, like what you said, to decipher what was being asked and to understand what that really meant and how he needed to sort of work within this system. Um, and the system seems to be set up so in such a way that is not supportive of differences in thinking, in supporting neurodivergence in general. I mean, there's so many different ways of thinking, yet the way that the system is set up is um, it seems very like almost like too oversimplified. And maybe you could talk on a little bit more on the topic of how the system is set up and kind of what changes you see as being beneficial to help open it up and be more supportive of the neurodivergent community.
Well, I mean, one of the big things is the assessment
Mhm.
is not geared for autistic people,
Yeah.
the way it's written.
Mhm.
And there may be one in UK that Sarah Cassidy and her team,
Mhm.
but I'm not exactly positive where that is right now.
Yeah.
What stage that is in right now. But just the assessment, a lot of autistic people fall through that. But before
Mhm.
you even get to the assessment, a lot of autistic people have said that they go to the ER, say that they are suicidal, and a clinician or a nurse or whoever they happen to be talking to doesn't think that autistic people are suicidal. They
Right.
don't know that the suicide rate is up to seven
Right.
times greater than the general population.
Yeah.
And so they don't even assess them.
Mhm.
And then when they do assess them and the assessment's not for autistic people, and then if there's an ensuing conversation, it can happen like what I just talked about, where it just the literalness of autistic people, and not everyone, but many autistic people are literal, and that kind of falls through as well, and
Mhm.
it's a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just to go back and touch on something you just said and to illuminate this for our audience and for our community, autistic people are 7 times more likely to complete a suicide. And what is that fact again? If you could say that again, because I think it's a really important statistic. Um, Autism has been on the rise, whether it's just more people being diagnosed or what have you. But we have, a crisis here, and I'm going to ask you to just illuminate that fact again.
Yeah, so the suicide rate is 7 times higher than the general population for autistic people across the lifespan as well.
Mm-hmm.
There was a study done by Kennedy Krieger in 2024 where there were 900 caregivers interviewed, and 40.3 of the kids they were taking care of were suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
Some had plans, and some were younger. It was 8 years old or younger,
Hmm.
in the study. So it's really across the lifespan.
Yeah.
Um, and there's unique risk factors of suicide for autistic people, as well as all the risk factors that are in the general population as well. And some of the protective factors in the general population are not protective factors for autistic people, but there's not enough research yet to find out what protective factors may be for
Mm.
autistic people.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think what we're doing here is exposing and talking about sort of the elephant in the room. It's something that we know intimately from having a son that was autistic who died by suicide. You know from all the experience and all the work that you've done, but what we're looking at now is okay, and now what, right? So we're
Mhm.
aware that there's a problem, and what's the solution? And we've been leaning into awareness is the treatment. Awareness is, the remedy. And so thank you for illuminating that for us. And then also I think a big part of that is through communication, right? Like spreading this message, getting the
Mhm.
word out, talking about a difficult subject, yet being authentic about it and real. I mean, I think that's one thing that I've come to embrace heavily from lessons from my autistic son is, tell it like it is. We don't need to sugarcoat this anymore. That's not helping anyone. What's going to
Well,
help is if we're honest and real about it. And
yeah.
so having that conversation and communication.
A lot of people don't want to talk about it at all. You're right.
Mhm.
And we do need to talk about it. And some are afraid that if they bring it up to somebody they're concerned about, it's going to put the idea in their head. But research has shown that it doesn't. And for autistic people and the social communication difficulties that we have, lots of the autistic people just don't know who to talk to about it.
Right.
So not only it will open the door to a conversation an autistic person may want to have but not know how. And then, um, depending on the reaction, which I, suggest parents, people, caregivers, even clinicians, really kind of react in a way that will cause the person to come back and talk to them again.
Hmm.
Because it's hard to hear, definitely. But that conversation needs to be out, like you said, out in the open
Hmm.
and happening, and
Yeah.
even to check in, because with autistic people, the suicidal ideation doesn't doesn't sort of wax and wane like it does depending on events with um, how a lot of people think it is. It ruminates and perseverates. It's like never gone if you have it. For an autistic person, they perseverate on it. And perseveration is very difficult to switch sets once you've started to perseverate on something. So they could be doing schoolwork, social events, happy, and it's always back there, just kind of churning in their thoughts.
And that's as difficult as it is to hear that, it's really important for that truth to be spoken because with Anthony, he had had the ideation. We had had some, we call them like episodes where he came forth and talked about it. And after he was hospitalized in a behavioral health hospital that was, you know, totally insensitive to him being on the spectrum, to him being autistic, they did not know how to handle him whatsoever. But in my naivete, when he came out, I thought, well, that's behind him now. Like he's learned from this and we're not going to go back there. And what you're saying is that perseveration continues that idea once it's there that it's not going away. And so what would you say to parents, caregivers, loved ones of someone who's autistic who has expressed some ideation? What would you suggest to them for support?
I would check in with them on the level of ideation they might be having. How is it today? Um, do you have any? Some of the resources that we have, especially the Reasons for Living resource, can help when they're having high suicidal ideation to remember um, their reasons for living, their reasons for staying, um, coping strategies, distraction strategies. The optimal thing would be to have it worked out so that the person experiencing the suicidal ideation felt comfortable to come to the parents and say, I'm having high suicidal ideation, even if there's access to means in some of their special interests. Say someone has an interest in whittling or some other kind of tool, that they could even trust enough to give those up, which is really hard because it is a special interest in what they use to calm themselves. Um, and then knowing that, the trust also happens the other way, where if they say, okay, I'm feeling my suicidal ideation is more in control, um, they could have them back, kind of have that working relationship with the suicidal ideation. Um, and just continuing to talk about it, talk about reducing access to means if there's other means in the house. Using autistic strengths too is a really big one that I think not a lot of people understand. But there's a lot of strengths for autistic people can use. If somebody's rule based, they can have a rule. And this is what I use. I have a rule where if my suicidal ideation is too high, I don't go into certain rooms where there's access to means. Sometimes I don't go in my home until I take a walk till I can manage it. So really, sometimes it's about managing it because it's such, that rumination is happening. And um, so rule based, routine based, if they have a safety plan and it becomes part of their routine, that's going to be used if they are routine based. And a lot of autistic people do get into those really strong routines. So creative thinking, being fair, talking about them being fair to themselves and to their family members because they really have a high sense of fairness. So all these strengths that people look at as deficits actually can help autistic people to stay safe.
Mhm. Those are really
Yeah.
helpful, valuable tools, and it was a subtlety in there in what you just shared, which was you said my ideation. So you yourself, it sounds like, have suicidal ideation and
Yes, yeah,
use
lots.
these
I
tools.
I would say most. There's a lot of autistic people who live with suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
It's not a it's not like something happens and then it's gone.
Mhm.
If they do become suicidal, which I was in 2020, 2014,
Mhm.
6 months before my husband.
Mm.
Um, and so it's something I live with and manage. And I have
Yeah.
put a support network into place, which was actually difficult but very much worth doing. And we have
Mhm.
a resource coming out about making your own personal support network. That's going to be released in the next couple of months, maybe
That's
even as soon as
fantastic.
September.
Yeah. Well, please keep us posted on that. We'd love
Yeah.
to share that also and let people know about it.
Yes, I will. A lot of the support network is usually geared around people, and
Mhm.
sometimes autistic people don't have people, and
Mhm.
sometimes they're emotionally connected to objects or pets, and that's the most comforting thing for them.
Mhm.
So that should be on both on a safety plan if they have one, or part of their support network. It,
Mhm.
we need to get people to realize that for autistic people, people aren't the first thing that may comfort them because there's so much social communication misunderstandings, rejection, bullying as a kid and as an adult, rejection, just a lot of trauma, social trauma.
Mhm.
So it's really what does um, comfort, this one particular autistic person, what does bring them joy, how do they feel supported, and
Mhm.
work with that instead of the general, well, who can you call. It could be that way, but it may not be that way.
So grateful you shared that. And that there was something I wanted to follow up on, but what you're sharing here is so tremendously rich and helpful. Thank you. It's also very hard because it's more stuff we didn't know that had we known likely would have made a difference. Um, and now it's going to make a difference. I'm going to hold on to my follow up question for a second. Something you shared about the people, like, Anthony was blessed, and maybe it was because he got so good at camouflaging and masking with an abundance of friends. And it just now I feel what you're saying, in that he reached out to these people and they asked for and he asked for help. And I know his friends know him well and they love him so much. And I know they gave him help. And on the one hand, it's so hard to know again that the help, as much as and as loving as it wasn't able to help him because of what you shared earlier. And it's it's so important that we find these ways to be able to get these kids, and it sounds like this perseveration could go on for years or decades or a lifetime to understand what they need so that they have people that they can communicate. Like here we're thinking like, oh, well, he has friends that he can go to. He has people that he trusts and are there for them. And I'm kind of babbling on, but on the one hand, it's a relief, but on the other hand, it's like we need to even do more so to help these teens. So much of what we're focusing on with teen mental health is being able to get these teens and tools so that they can support their friends on the spectrum in the ways that they want, or ask the questions that you've posed to understand what support really looks like for them before we offer support. I think that's the real breakthrough, is understanding from them, asking the questions, what does support and help look like for you? So when you're in this perseveration, that we can bring you to what you've shared would be most helpful.
Yes, exactly. It if somebody connection means different things to different autistic people, and it's not the same as connection that, I believe, I don't know, I'm not non-autistic, that non-autistic people feel is connection. I have experienced people trying to connect with me that doesn't I don't understand it. Um, and so they feel like they have, but for the autistic person, every single time that happens, it's more evidence that they will never be able to connect in the way that connection sort of is defined. And so they feel like they can't do it. But if they were asked, what causes what can I do to cause you to feel connected to me? It might be something very different than a non-autistic person might feel. They might feel like, if you could just come sit with me while I do, we don't have to talk, just come sit with me or something like that. They might feel connected. Let me talk about my special interest and I could feel connected. And this isn't things, so this would be true support because it wouldn't be something the non-autistic person would necessarily enjoy, but it would be connection for the autistic person, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
It does. This is so powerful and helpful. And if I might take the original question Samara asked, how can we help other parents who are facing the same thing, and now apply that question to crisis, right? So for us, when we learned of Anthony's suicidal ideation, it was just like you shared. Call 988, the folks come out, they do assessment, there's no plan. I'm looking around, all right, so feeling like reasonably good that there's no plan, but then what's the plan with no plan? And it seems there's only a plan if you have a plan.
Mm.
And we're, our mission is to close that gap between high functioning autism, neurodiversity, and suicide, that 7 times greater that you're talking about. And we're working with folks, and so glad to meet you. Obviously you're someone we really need to work with on this, but right now, while there's no crisis intervention, whether it's first responders, schools, 988 hotline, some parents of autistic children are going to watch this and they're going to be in crisis. What would you recommend that they do or say to first responders, to folks that come out from 988 or at schools?
Well, one of the things that happens a lot is autistic kids, adults, they're not believed. So education has to be part of the process. So educating those people, educating the first responders, the schools officials. Um, a lot of our resources can do it. You can also, if it was me, I might even um, give them copies of research studies that's, highlighted where the important information is, that say autistic, the diagnosis of autism is a risk factor. um, the unique risk factors that are out there, high, just so this education, and then believing. So many autistic people have reported just not being believed.
Mhm.
And a lot of times what happens is because autistic people withdraw for self-care, and they can withdraw with inside of themselves, so it doesn't necessarily have to be to a place. They
Mhm.
can withdraw inside to them of themselves, and that happens, and they look calm and fine on the outside while saying I'm suicidal, and so they're not believed. um, Many are sent home from the ER or just simply not believed. And they can be saying that they are suicidal. They can be saying, they have a plan or two. Um, and people don't believe them
Mm.
because the people are looking for a certain level of distress. And so, I can't say it enough in my trainings. Can't say it enough that an autistic person's distress is going to look different than a non-autistic person's distress. And a person who looks calm and fine may be in serious need of support and may be suicidal and definitely in crisis. The more calm they look, the deeper they could be going into crisis, until they sometimes lose the ability to speak um, verbally, where they can speak verbally, but they might even lose that. So then they can't even advocate for themselves while looking calm and fine, while being suicidal. So it's very tricky.
It is. Um,
Yeah.
are there any signs that you would say that you could help educate loved ones of autistic folks if, that their loved one may be at risk?
Well, I mean, asking,
Mhm.
but you're asking what could be the signs to prompt them to ask. And this is tricky too because autistic people are routine based.
Mhm.
A lot of times for non-autistic people, a change in routine is concerning.
Mhm.
And, well, they're not doing their after school activities anymore, or they're not joining in with their friends anymore, or they're not going to work. And that can be concerning. But for an autistic person, because they're routine based, they would still go to work, still hang out with their friends, still do their after school activities, even if they were in crisis.
Mhm.
So, what are I think withdrawing more so at after work or school, withdrawing for self-care, but coming out still dysregulated.
Mhm.
um, Not texting as much. Say somebody texts, the mom, the dad, the grandma every day, and then they don't hear from them for a while. That's cause for concern. um, Talking about it too, talking about it as possibly a special interest, which some autistic people do have it as a special interest.
Mhm.
But talking about it, talking about giving away prized possessions, that's a big one, because like I said, that some autistic people can be really emotionally connected to their possessions or a possession. So that also would be concerning.
Yeah, that was
Is
something that we only discovered in retrospect. We didn't know, um, Anthony, when he hung himself, it was a Sunday night, and on that Saturday night, we were not with him, but after the fact, a friend had told us that that night he had given her a significant amount of money in an envelope and said, "This is for you to take someone to Disneyland, and it doesn't have to be me, but I just want you to be happy." And, I can see that now. I mean, it wasn't a, material possession, it was money, but it was still something that he had worked hard for and just gave it away. And she said, "He seemed he seemed better than I had ever seen him before." And I've heard that also of, not a care in the world because perhaps he had already decided. And so now there were no worries. And he just wanted others to be happy and to experience joy. So you've touched on something that, we didn't realize before, but again, part of our mission here is to share the messages of our story and our experience in hopes that it can help other people. So thank you for illuminating that.
And if I might expand, like, so much of what you've shared here rings true, and even my emotion. It's hard not to wish I had these things before, and yet I'm so grateful that you share them now. For parents like ourselves, like what you share about is so tricky because he didn't stop doing activities. He didn't stop doing his routines. Not only did he not stop, he seemed to be doing them more, and there was less fulfillment. And when you share about they're not believed, like it, it was hard to believe. I couldn't rationalize what I'm hearing with what I'm seeing, and it just bears repeating how tricky it is because it's the opposite of what we're telling teens to look for, and teens and parents to look for in the youth in terms of suicidal ideation. The things that we're telling the larger population to look for are actually what makes it so tricky, or opposite of what we should be looking for in the autistic community. And then we find, like, I the words were so powerful. I mean, he was institutionalized. Suicide was so very real for him, and yet it seemed unbelievable. And I know there's no fix for it, and just talking about this trickiness will hopefully help people. If you understand what Lisa's sharing so openly here, is that the things that actually help us as parents think, okay, maybe this isn't as serious as it's suicide after all. But I think the human brain doesn't want to believe it. So, but what she's telling us here is that the things that would lead us to believe it's not potentially real for this person are actually the reasons why it may likely be real for this person. And we share with you openly that this is our experience.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you had that experience. It's it's devastating. Um,
Yeah.
but I also like to remind people that if somebody is truly suicidal, they will um, kill themselves no matter how many. I mean, we need to intervene. We need to get the resources out. We need to always make sure that we're doing something to keep them here. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if they're really going to, if they've made their mind up, ultimately it is their decision. And because so many people, just think over and over again, what could I have said? What could I have done? What if I did this? What if I did that? And it's really their decision, in the end. And but it is a devastating decision that they've made in a lot of pain. So
That means so much to me personally because for the totality of Anthony's lifetime, like every decision he made, like he executed on. So why would this be different? As hard as it is, and we must do everything we can to intervene. There's some level of peace that, with what you've shared as honestly as you have and as clearly as you have, brings for me.
And I just want to thank you also for that, both of you, for your honesty and your truth in this conversation. And it is something that I felt like, uh, it's impossible to face that as a parent. It's impossible for me to think that my son would believe that or that he would think that way. Um, and then again, like I wanted to help him when he came to me for help, but then I thought, okay, that's done. We're going to move on from that. That's over. And it wasn't over. But it was so scary for me that
mm,
I I wanted to do everything I could, and at the same time, it seemed inconceivable and impossible that was the truth of the situation, and unfortunately, it really was, and it did come back, and so I think where I'd like to take the conversation now is to, not what could I have done differently, because I can't live that way, and I have to find peace in my story and in our journey, and knowing that I'm here now to share a message with others. And it is that if a parent or a loved one, maybe they don't know, or they have a suspicion that their loved one is autistic, or maybe they do have a diagnosis and they know their loved one is autistic. Um, Maybe they've heard of some suicidal ideation from their autistic loved one. Maybe they haven't. But what it sounds to me that would be helpful, and maybe you can illuminate this step by step, would be, is it asking the questions of, have you ever had suicidal thoughts? Have you ever had thoughts of harming or hurting yourself? And how can I support you? And just, I feel like having the courage to speak that, because that felt like a very scary conversation for me to have, because I didn't want to know that the answer was yes. But if the answer is yes, and support and care and love is what, the net of the equation comes out to be, then absolutely I want to know that. And I want to give parents and loved ones of autistic people the courage to ask that question. So is it first asking the question? When you talk a lot about the care and just providing, asking the question. Can you talk a little bit about that, what that would look like?
Yeah, I mean, I suggest to people practicing in the mirror
Mm,
because it's so hard to say. It is so hard to say to somebody, are you having thoughts of suicide? Do you have suicidal ideation? Do you have a plan to kill yourself? That's really hard to say. And then gearing yourself, like you said, for the answer. And then what are you going to do after that? So I suggest they practice that question in the mirror, because the more they say it, the more it might kind of um, be easier to say.
mhm.
And then it's going to be very, very important um, what they say next,
Yeah.
because what they say next may decide whether the person that they're concerned about is going to talk about it with them again or not. Um, Things like, but don't we, don't, well, I don't want to say
Yeah.
what things may, but there are answers that could cause the person to feel like this is an open-ended conversation that can continue, and there are answers that the person may say, well, that didn't go well. So
Do you mind
and
if
keep
we role
those.
play? I don't mean to interrupt, but if I were to say that to you, Lisa, have you had thoughts of suicide? So instead of freaking out, which is kind of what I would want to do as a parent, I would say, I love you no matter what. I'm here for you and I want to support you. How can I help you? Or I don't know, what do you think would be a good response to that?
Well, in all honesty,
Mhm.
um, it, it doesn't have to do with, like, if love could keep people here,
Yeah.
no one would be gone. It's usually not a matter of love. It's a matter of what might be going on in their life. Um, Thwarted belonging is a unique risk factor. Those unmet needs, social communication. So asking how you could support them
Yeah.
is definitely, telling them you love them somewhere in the conversation would be definitely good and useful. Um, But what we want to do is find a way to find out what is happening for them. Are they not connecting with people? I've known some autistic people who have died by suicide who just couldn't connect, and they didn't want to spend any more time trying to connect with other people. They had lots of friends. They just couldn't connect. So is that the problem? Are they feeling overwhelmed all the time? Is the sensory
Mm.
um, environment outside of the home, are they super sensitive and that's just too much for them? What is going on, and then how
Mm.
can we support it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I like that. Like, what what's going on? What's contributing to you feeling this way?
And sometimes autistic people may not know.
Mhm.
Um, and saying I don't know for an autistic person, I take that to be a um, invitation to problem solve.
Mhm.
And especially if they're teens, we hear teens saying I don't know all the time.
Mhm.
um, and usually it's like it means I don't want to talk. But um, you can ask them, does your I don't know mean that you just really don't know, or does your I don't know mean you don't want to talk?
Mhm.
Typically with autistic people, it's going to be I don't know. And so they may have these feelings, they may have these strong um, feelings of suicidal ideation, which are not pleasant to live with. um, and they may not know why they're having them.
Mhm.
So it's just really an invitation to problem solve,
Yeah.
use their creativity, thinking outside of the box. Um, they always need to be part of the solution,
Mhm.
even if they're young. They're
Yeah.
experiencing this, so they need to be part of the solution to what
Yeah.
they're experiencing.
Yeah. So can we talk about what might be what where you might be feeling overwhelmed or how we can support you? Those kinds of
Yeah,
invitations. Thank you, Lisa.
yeah.
It's really helpful, and it's hard. It's hard for us
Mhm.
to go there, and I think it's really important to kind of break down into the details of these conversations because it is scary for everyone involved, and it's so necessary and important that we know how to talk with our loved ones that are feeling this way and to, like you said, to let them be seen and heard and understood and validated, and to offer that point of connection, and to give a space to, creatively look at what's next. Um,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You I mean, this has just been so tremendously helpful and meaningful and valuable. And personally speaking, I look forward to connecting with you more. I mean, a
Be
question.
great.
Thank you. A question I have is like we're just like we're talking about the propensity for this group of loving, caring human beings to not only have suicidal ideation but perseverate on it even amongst the example of our son and many others, seemingly achievement, fitting in academic achievement or whatever that is there anything we can do or help to help minimize, reduce, or even help them, I don't know if move past that ideation is the right term. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think you know where I'm going with this. Like,
It's very difficult. Um, the only way I have personally found out, so there's no research behind this, is a lived experience, personal thing to try to stop the rumination, is to practice. So I might be ruminating on a certain thought, and then I will practice thinking about something else, and it actually is, it takes up energy. It's difficult, and I will think on the other thought. When I find myself ruminating on the what I'm trying to stop, I'll see how long I went, and I'll try to go longer next time.
Mm.
And so there is that practice. Um, there's also distraction where, distraction strategies for whatever the person who is experiencing this suicidal ideation, what is distracting for them. Um, and unfortunately, we run into clinicians who don't think that that might be enough, like flipping quarters might be very distracting
Mm.
for a person. They're counting, they're watching it flip, it could be very distracting, and a clinician may not put it down because they don't think it might work. But listening to the autistic person tell them what is distracting for them and having them be believed again, that's important. Um, and their special interests may be very distracting. And unfortunately, for autistic teens, a lot of their distraction is around screen time, and parents, don't want a lot of screen time. Um, they want a minimum, just to have a healthy balance of screen time.
Mhm.
And so, maybe it's like when a child breaks a bone or is sick or something, and they get more screen time because they have to be laid up. Maybe this is a time to kind of relax those limits and let them be distracted a little more. But then, of course, um, kids are smart, and so you always have to watch out that balance of, of what to do. But perseveration is still, still trying to figure out what could really help that stop, because it's um, such a strong mental thought.
You've given us so much here, and it's the word that's my makeup wants to solve and fix, right? But the word that keeps coming up in my mind is the word that you've given, and is it's tricky. And it sucks that it's tricky, because if it weren't tricky, then we could just execute a, a formula, if you will, that says we have high functioning autism, takes these steps, and it's not tricky. And well, it hurts that it's not, nothing's that easy, but that it's not, I'm oversimplifying that it's not that easy. But if we have landed anything here today in this time together, is to understand that it is tricky. So for me, speaking for myself, seem to have taken one path, which was like to just follow these professionals and what they're telling us. But now, what I would share to somebody in my own shoes facing that is, this is tricky. So, whatever they're sharing is coming from everything that they know and understand to be, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to impact my child or this person. So, even if I have an experience where I feel like something's landed and it's right, if I keep tricky in mind, I need to sort of take the other side and hypothesize that what I feel good about may actually be the opposite. And what might I need to consider if that were to be true?
Yes. And um, believe them. Believe the autistic person, even if the clinician might be saying one thing, and then the autistic person is saying, how I really feel is this. Remember, one of the strengths of autistic people is honesty. We get in trouble for being too honest. And
True
yet,
that.
when we need people to believe us, we're not believed. So it's tricky, and believe them. Um, Unfortunately, there are clinicians out there who do believe they know about autistic people, but will not believe an autistic person, will, try to use the same sort of um, distraction strategies and coping skills and safety plans, and that for non-autistic people. And it's just going to be what I call unintentional harm by
Mhm.
well-meaning people.
Mhm.
It's just going to harm them.
So, for our listeners and for folks that have tuned into this message today, are there other important messages or considerations that you think are really important to know?
Well, I mean, we talked about a lot today.
Hmm.
I would say if you're concerned about somebody, um, follow follow your intuition. If you're concerned, there's a reason for it, even if you can't pinpoint it. Um, Talk openly and honestly because that's what autistic people understand.
Hmm.
Direct, um, and if somebody's in a crisis and you're trying to work with them, few words as possible, getting straight to the point is actually um, kind.
Hmm.
And the autistic stress can look very different than neurotypical or non-autistic distress, and believe them.
Hmm.
That's just it's so important.
It's really important. And you've given us so much today, your wisdom, your personal experience, your guidance. It gives hope to others, to us, to our community, to folks struggling who have an autistic individual in their lives and may not know how to communicate with them about this difficult topic and this difficult um, consideration. Um, suicide. It's real. It's significant. It's rampant, and it's something that needs to be brought up to the surface into conversations. So I appreciate you
Yes.
taking the time to have the conversation with us. Um, there's one final question that I like to ask all of our guests on the show because we are the Endurant movement and this is the Endurant Show. What does being endurant mean to you?
Being endurant. Well, that is very close to my very favorite word, which is resilient.
Mm.
But in enduring, endurant would be just, hanging on, just keep on moving forward. Um, Keep on working toward educating, keep on working toward having people understand autistic people in crisis. That's very, very important to me in my life. And, making it so that when autistic people go out and actually are very bravely seeking assistance and seeking support, because that's also a social skill, that they are met with support that they understand as supportive and not unintentional harm. So just, I guess endurant would mean continuing to keep on doing that.
It's
Beautiful.
beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, we're so grateful for this conversation, and I feel that lives will be saved because of it. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for having this an endurance show to have. I mean, we can have all the ideas and resources, but if we don't have a platform to speak on, we can't get them out there. So I'm very grateful to both of you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Lisa.
I feel Anthony's spirit speaking through you, and I'm so grateful. Thank you for taking your time and energy with us today and the love and the shares. Thank you.
And thank you to all of our donors and sponsors and people who have poured money in so that we could do this show. What Lisa just shared there is what's most important. If we're talking about awareness is the treatment and the cure, and what folks like Lisa and our child and countless others need is the platform. Thank you so much.
And thank you
Thank
both
you.
for inviting me today.
Yeah. A huge thank you to Lisa Morgan for sharing her expertise and lived experience in navigating autism and surviving suicidal ideation. Check out Lisa Morgan Consulting. She and her co chair work with the Autism and Suicide Prevention Work Group, and her book, Crisis Supports for the Autism Community, is a toolkit for practical guidance and insights on trauma informed support and compassionate intervention. Whether you're supporting a loved one, working in crisis response, or seeking to better understand hidden struggles in yourself and others, we hope this episode gave you the language, tools, and most of all, the awareness, compassion, and hope you need.
To connect with Lisa and access her resources, visit autismcrisissupport.com. And if this episode resonated with you, share with others who may benefit. Let's foster a culture where noticing, honoring, and responding to unseen struggles matters. You can also visit endurantmovement.org to learn more about the show, access resources, and support our mission to foster healing, resilience, and purpose driven impact. We'll see you next time on The Endurance Show. Thank you for listening to The Endurance Show. If this conversation moved you, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To view the conversations, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And to be a part of the community, follow us at Endurant Movement. And lastly, if you feel called to support the movement and help us ensure no teen ever feels alone again, visit endurantmovement.org to learn more, and if you can, make a donation. Together we can create lasting change, one conversation, one connection at a time.